The radiant golden beams of the morning sun cascaded gently over the tranquil, sprawling fields of Greystone Valley, bathing a picturesque farm nestled snugly in its heart with a soft, inviting glow. This cherished land, tenderly cultivated by a humble farmer named James, bore the weathered marks of time and toil, passed down through generations of turners who poured their hearts into its soil. The farm had once stood as a proud emblem of prosperity and abundance. Now it struggled to sustain James's modest, solitary existence. Debts loomed over him like dark, ominous thunderheads, while failing crops drove him perilously close to the abyss of despair. For countless seasons, James had battled tirelessly to keep the farm afloat, leaning heavily on his small, clucking flock of chickens and a few stubborn rows of corn to eke out a living. His once vibrant fields, now choked with sprawling weeds, mirrored the heavy burden of his family's storied legacy, pressing relentlessly upon his tired shoulders. Years earlier, his beloved wife had slipped away from this world, leaving him with nothing but the quiet solace found in the repetitive rhythm of tending his land. One brisk, dew-laden spring morning, as James embarked on his customary rounds to check the welfare of his chickens, a peculiar glint near the distant edge of his field halted him mid-stride. A faint, shimmering reflection danced across the wet grass, teasing his eyes with its elusive sparkle. Intrigued, he trudged forward, his weathered boots sinking slightly into the yielding, moist earth with each deliberate step. What he stumbled upon froze him in sheer astonishment. There, nestled in a shallow hollow within the field, lay an egg, an extraordinary egg, easily 3 times the size of any his hens had ever produced. Its shell gleamed with a pale, pearlescent luster, adorned with subtle, swirling patterns that seemed to ripple with an almost otherworldly grace. For a fleeting moment, James wondered if it might be an elaborate jest crafted by mischievous hands. But as he knelt and brushed his calloused fingers across its surface, a gentle, living warmth pulsed beneath, banishing all skepticism. "What manner of bird could lay an egg such as this?" he murmured under his breath, his rough fingertips tracing the intricate designs with cautious reverence. His initial instinct was one of wariness. Could this belong to some wild predator prowling? Unseen, was it prudent to disturb it? Yet his curiosity swiftly eclipsed his trepidation. With utmost care, he cradled the egg in his arms and carried it back to the weathered farmhouse, where he fashioned a makeshift nest from a generous pile of golden straw. He hadn't the faintest notion of what creature might dwell within, but a quiet intuition whispered that this discovery could be the long-awaited sign he'd sought, a fragile thread of hope to pull him from the brink. Little did he realize, the arrival of this enigmatic egg would unfurl a tapestry of events destined to transform his life irrevocably. The massive egg swiftly became the cherished centerpiece of James's modest abode. Nestled snugly in a cozy corner of his kitchen, surrounded by a protective ring of straw, it radiated a tender warmth that seemed almost alive, as though it breathed with a quiet vitality. James couldn't shake the unshakable feeling that this egg was something truly extraordinary, though its presence left him grappling with a cascade of questions devoid of answers. His days settled into a steady cadence, rising early to check on the egg, adjusting its warmth with an ancient heat lamp he'd unearthed from the dusty depths of his barn, and muttering half-formed theories to himself as he went about his chores. Could it be an ostrich egg? The thought felt implausible. Ostriches were strangers to the rolling hills of Greystone Valley, and he'd never glimpsed one in all his years. Might it be a prank orchestrated by the local children? But the logistics of sneaking such a marvel onto his land undetected defied reason. His initial curiosity soon deepened into an all-consuming obsession. At the local feed store, he cornered grizzled old-timers and fellow farmers, pressing them for any scrap of wisdom about the egg's origins, hoping someone might unravel its mystery. "Never heard tell of anything like that," one elderly man croaked, shaking his head with a mix of intrigue and disbelief. "If you're blessed, it might fetch a pretty penny. If you're cursed, well, I'd keep a rifle close just in case." James chuckled nervously, masking the unease that gnawed at him, but the old man's words clung to his thoughts like burrs. What kind of creature could emerge from an egg so vast? Was he courting danger by sheltering it? Despite the flickering, the doubts, he couldn't bring himself to abandon it. An inexplicable pull tethered him to its fate. One tranquil evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, the sharp crunch of tires on gravel pierced the stillness. James glanced out his window to see an unfamiliar truck rolling into his driveway, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. A tall figure clad in a weathered jacket stepped out, his heavy boots thudding against the earth as he strode purposefully toward the farmhouse. "James," the man called out, his voice deep and resonant, carrying a note of quiet authority. "I am Dr. Daniel, a biologist. I've heard whispers through the grapevine that you found something quite unusual." James hesitated, his hand lingering on the doorframe, but finally nodded. Word traveled like wildfire in a small town, and he'd known it was only a matter of time before someone came sniffing around his secret. He invited the man inside, and Dr. Daniel's eyes locked onto the egg with an intensity that bordered on reverence. "My God," the biologist whispered, dropping to one knee to examine it more closely. "Do you have any inkling of what this could be?" "Not the slightest," James admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "I was hoping you might enlighten me." Dr. Daniel retrieved a small handheld device from his satchel, scanning the egg's surface with meticulous care. "The heat it's emitting, this isn't typical. And these markings, look at them closely. They resemble patterns etched into fossils from millions of years past." James's brow furrowed, his mind struggling to keep pace. "Fossils? What exactly are you implying?" Daniel paused, his expression inscrutable as he weighed his response. "I'm not ready to say definitively, but if this egg is what I suspect it might be, you could be cradling something that's been extinct for a very, very long time." The words landed like a thunderclap, reverberating through James's core. Extinct. Could this strange gift be the miracle he'd pleaded for in his bleakest moments? Over the following weeks, James found himself increasingly bound to the mysterious egg, spending countless hours perched beside it, speaking to it as though it might somehow hear his hopes and fears. Dr. Daniel became a frequent visitor, arriving with an array of scientific tools to run tests and scribble notes, though he remained frustratingly elusive with concrete answers. One fateful morning, as James fine-tuned the heat lamp's position, a subtle vibration jolted his senses. Startled, he leaned in closer, his breath catching as the egg quivered faintly, a delicate tapping sound emanating from within its shell. His heart raced with a wild, uncontainable thrill. "It's happening," Dr. Daniel confirmed over the phone when James called him in a flurry of excitement. "The hatching process has begun." James could scarcely contain his anticipation, his pulse pounding in his ears. He stationed himself beside the egg day and night, forsaking sleep as the faint tapping grew steadily louder, a persistent drumbeat of life. Finally, deep into one restless night, the shell splintered with a sound akin to breaking glass, sharp and crystalline. As it parted, James's breath seized in his throat. What emerged was a creature beyond the realm of his wildest imaginings. Its tiny, slick body shimmered with a newborn sheen, gazing up at him with large, intelligent eyes that sparkled with curiosity. A soft mantle of downy feathers cloaked it, and its delicate claws hinted at both vulnerability and latent power. Dr. Daniel, who had rushed over the moment the egg began to crack, stood frozen, his jaw slack with awe. This isn't possible. "What is it?" James asked, his voice barely rising above a whisper, trembling with wonder. Daniel knelt beside the hatchling, his eyes wide with incredulity. "It resembles a species of dinosaur, a theropod perhaps, but it's small, almost bird-like. I've never seen anything remotely like it in all my years of study." James's mind reeled at the revelation, a dinosaur, alive and breathing in his humble kitchen. The hatchling emitted a soft, tentative chirp, its tiny claws grasping feebly at the air. Without a second thought, James extended his hand, and the creature nuzzled against his palm, its warmth seeping into his skin like a quiet promise. "It's bonded with you," Dr. Daniel observed, his tone a mix of astonishment and certainty. "You're the first thing it saw upon hatching. As far as it's concerned, you're its parent." James's heart swelled with a potent blend of pride and responsibility, a tidal wave of emotion he hadn't felt in years. He cradled the fragile creature in his hands, marveling at its paradoxical blend of frailty and strength. In that crystalline moment, he understood that his life would never be the same again. The following morning, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window in golden ribbons, the hatchling began to explore its newfound world. It waddled clumsily on its spindly legs, chirping with innocent curiosity as it investigated everything from the scuffed toes of James's boots to the rough-hewn edge of the table. Its feathery down caught the light, shimmering faintly, and James couldn't help but smile at its boundless, unguarded wonder. Dr. Daniel returned later that afternoon, his arms laden with several cases of scientific equipment. "James," he began, his tone grave and measured, "we need to have a serious conversation. I've sent some preliminary data to a few trusted colleagues, and their responses have been nothing short of alarming." James's brow creased with concern as he glanced at the hatchling, now perched precariously on a chair, pecking playfully at the wooden leg. "Alarming in what way?" Daniel set his gear down with a thud and pulled out a tablet, displaying an array of intricate charts and vivid images. "Based on the structure of the egg and the genetic material I've managed to analyze so far, this creature, whatever it is, exhibits traits that align with extinct theropod dinosaurs. But here's the twist. It's not purely prehistoric in origin." "What do you mean by that?" James asked, a cold shiver creeping up his spine as the implications began to take shape. Daniel hesitated, choosing his words with deliberate care. "There's evidence of genetic manipulation woven into its makeup. Someone, or something, engineered this creature intentionally. It's not merely a dinosaur, it's a hybrid, a fusion of ancient and modern design." The words struck James like a hammer blow, reverberating through his skull. "Engineered? You're telling me someone created this thing? For what purpose?" "I don't have that answer yet," Daniel admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "But it sheds light on why the egg appeared here on your farm. Whoever crafted it might have been conducting an experiment, or worse, attempting to conceal it from prying eyes. And now that it's hatched, they may well come looking for it." James's protective instincts surged to the forefront, a fierce resolve igniting within him. He looked over at the hatchling, now chirping happily as it struggled to climb onto the countertop. "Nobody's taking this little guy away from me. He's staying right here where he belongs." Daniel nodded in understanding, though his expression remained etched with concern. "I respect your sentiment, James, but this situation is far bigger than either of us can fathom. If someone engineered this creature, they could pose a significant danger, not just to it, but to us as well." Over the next few days, the hatchling's behavior took on an increasingly strange tenor. While it was mostly playful and affectionate, There were fleeting moments when its instincts seemed to seize control. One lazy afternoon, James found it staring intently out the window, its tiny body rigid and its feathers bristling as it emitted a low, guttural growl, a sound entirely new and unsettling, sending a shiver racing down his spine. "What's gotten into you, little guy?" he asked, approaching with cautious steps. The hatchling relaxed instantly at the touch of his hand, but the eerie moment lingered in James's mind, a whisper of unease. Was the creature sensing something beyond his perception? That night, as James prepared to turn in, a faint rustling sound from outside snapped him to attention. Grabbing a flashlight from the shelf, he stepped out onto the creaking porch and swept the beam across the darkened fields. At first, he saw nothing but the gentle sway of grass in the breeze, but then a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadowy figure skulking near the edge of his property. "Hey!" James shouted, his voice cutting sharply through the stillness. Of the night, the figure froze for a heartbeat before darting out of sight, swallowed by the darkness. His heart pounded in his chest as he hurried back inside, locking the doors with trembling hands and checking on the hatchling, now curled snugly in its makeshift nest in the living room. "What in the world is going on here?" he muttered, to himself, his mind racing with a tumult of possibilities. The next morning, Dr. Daniel arrived with a sense of urgency, his face alight with news. "James, I think we've got a lead." I cross-referenced some of the genetic markers from the hatchling with data from a private database. It appears the DNA was spliced using technology that's far beyond what's available to the general public. Whoever did this has access to serious resources, unimaginable resources. James frowned, his thoughts churning. "You're saying this isn't just some rogue scientist tinkering in a basement. This is something big, very big," Daniel confirmed, his voice steady but grave. "And I suspect that shadow you saw last night might have been someone scoping out the egg or the creature it birthed." Together, they set up a network of cameras around the farm to monitor for any suspicious activity, a precaution against the unseen threat lurking just beyond their grasp. Meanwhile, the hatchling continued to grow at an astonishing rate, a marvel of nature unfolding before their eyes. Within a mere week, it had doubled in size, its feathers deepening into an iridescent sheen that caught the light like polished obsidian, its claws sharpening into precise instruments of potential power, and its movements evolving from clumsy to eerily calculated. Despite this rapid transformation, the bond between James and the hatchling deepened with each passing day. The creature followed him everywhere, chirping joyfully whenever James spoke to it, responding eagerly to the name he'd bestowed upon it. Talon, chosen after witnessing its deft snatch of a moth in mid-air with breathtaking skill. "Talon," James said one quiet evening as they sat together on the porch. The creature nestled contentedly at his side. "I don't know where you came from or what brought you here, but you're part of this family now. I'll protect you, no matter what comes our way." Just as a fragile sense of normalcy began to settle over them, a sleek black SUV pulled into his driveway one unsuspecting afternoon, shattering the calm. Two men in crisp suits stepped out, their expressions cold and professionally detached, sending a jolt of dread through James's gut as they approached the house with purposeful strides. "Mr. Turner," one of them announced, flashing a badge with an air of authority. "We're with the Department of Wildlife and Environmental Affairs. We've received reports of an unusual animal on your property. Mind if we take a look around?" James's mind raced, his instincts screaming that these men were not what they claimed to be. Their polished shoes and pristine suits reeked of something far more sinister, perhaps government agents, or worse, private contractors dispatched by whoever had created Talon in the first place. "I'm sorry," James replied, forcing a casual tone despite the tightness in his chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." Just regular chickens and cows here, nothing out of the ordinary." The men exchanged a fleeting glance. Before the second one spoke, his voice edged with insistence. "We'd still like to take a look around, for public safety, you understand?" James planted his feet firmly, his resolve hardening like steel. "You're going to need a warrant for that." The men paused, their polite veneer slipping for a brief telling moment. "We'll be back," one of them said curtly, before turning on his heel to leave. As the SUV disappeared down the dusty road, James's heart thundered in his chest, a cacophony of fear and determination. He knew this encounter was merely the opening salvo in a much larger battle. Whoever these men represented, they wouldn't stop until they had what they came for, and that meant Talon was in greater peril than ever before. James understood. He couldn't afford to wait passively for their return. Their polished demeanor had unnerved him deeply, and an urgent need to safeguard Talon surged within him like a tidal wave. He paced the living room restlessly, casting frequent glances at the hatchling, now growing at a pace that defied all natural logic. Talon was no longer the fragile, helpless creature he'd found. Its sharp claws clicked softly against the hardwood floor with every step, and its watchful, intelligent eyes followed James's every movement with an almost uncanny awareness. "They'll come back," James muttered under his breath, the words heavy with foreboding. "And next time, they won't bother with pleasantries." Dr. Daniel arrived later that evening, his expression etched with grim determination as James recounted the unsettling visit. "This confirms our worst suspicions," Daniel said, rubbing his temple as though to ward off a mounting headache. "These men aren't from any legitimate wildlife agency. They're almost certainly connected to whoever engineered Talon in the first place." "Then what do we do?" James asked, his voice tinged with a desperate edge, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "I can't let them take him. He's family now." Daniel nodded, his eyes reflecting an understanding of the profound emotional bond that had formed between James and the creature. "We need to keep him hidden, but more crucially, we need to uncover who's behind this. The only way to truly protect Talon is to expose the truth to the world." Over the next few days, James and Daniel worked tirelessly to fortify the farm against the looming threat. They installed additional cameras at strategic points around the property and reinforced the barn, transforming it into a secure sanctuary where Talon could roam freely without fear of discovery. Daniel reached out to his network of trusted colleagues, hoping to unearth any leads on the genetic engineering that had given rise to Talon's existence. Meanwhile, Talon's growth showed no signs of abating. The once tiny hatchling now stood as tall as James's knee, its feathers gleaming with an almost otherworldly sheen that shifted in the light. Its movements carried a graceful yet powerful precision, and it seemed to comprehend James's words with a depth that transcended mere instinct. "Talon," James said one afternoon, crouching down to meet the creature's piercing gaze, "you've got to stay out of sight, okay? Those men, they're dangerous and I can't lose you." The creature tilted its head, letting out a low, resonant chirp that sounded almost like an acknowledgement, as though it grasped the gravity of his plea. James couldn't help but muster a faint, strained smile, despite the tension coiling within him. "Good boy." One evening, Daniel burst into the farmhouse, his arms laden with a stack of papers and his tablet, his voice a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. "James, I found something significant," he announced, spreading the documents across the kitchen table with a flourish and pointing to a series of complex diagrams and cryptic coded entries. "There's a biotech company, Jora Labs, that's been quietly experimenting with hybrid animals in remote locations. They often abandon these sites when they're finished, leaving no trace. It's highly probable that Talon's egg was part of one of their clandestine experiments." James leaned over the table, his eyes scanning the papers with growing intensity. So they just leave these creatures behind, like discarded refuse. Daniel let out a weary sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. It's worse than that. If an experiment is deemed a failure or too volatile to control, they dispose of it without hesitation. Talon might have been a test subject that slipped through the cracks or was deliberately hidden from their grasp. James's fists clenched tightly, his knuckles whitening with suppressed anger. And now they want him back to finish the job. That's not happening, not while I'm still breathing. Daniel placed a steadying hand on James's shoulder, his gaze resolute. We'll fight this together, but we need more evidence. If we can expose what they've been doing to the public, they won't just be coming after Talon. They'll have to answer to the world for their actions. The peaceful evenings that James had once cherished on the farm became a distant memory as he and Daniel remained perpetually on high alert, their senses attuned to every rustle and shadow. The cameras occasionally captured fleeting glimpses of movement near the perimeter, but nothing definitive enough to act upon. Still, James couldn't shake the persistent sensation that they were being watched, an invisible noose tightening around them. One restless night, as James sat on the porch with Talon at his side, the creature suddenly bolted upright, its feathers bristling and a low, guttural growl rumbling from its throat, unlike any sound James had heard it make before. A primal warning that sent chills coursing through him. "What is it, boy?" James whispered, rising to his feet and following Talon's unwavering gaze toward the dense tree line at the edge of the property. Moments later, a faint glimmer of light pierced the darkness, a flashlight beam sweeping through the undergrowth. James's heart pounded like a war drum as he realized someone was trespassing on his land. Grabbing his shotgun from its resting place by the door, he motioned for Talon to stay put and crept stealthily toward the source of the light, his breath shallow and quick. As he drew nearer, he caught the murmur of hushed voices cutting through the night air. "We can't leave without it," one voice snapped, frustration evident in its clipped tone. "The boss wants results, and he won't take kindly to failure." James's grip tightened on the shotgun, his resolve hardening. "Who's there?" he barked, stepping boldly out of the shadows, the weapon leveled before him. The intruders froze, their flashlights illuminating their startled faces, clad in dark, unmarked uniforms that bespoke a professional operation. One of them raised his hands in a placating gesture, a forced smile stretching across his features. "Easy there, farmer. We're just surveying the area. No harm intended." "Get off my land," James growled, his aim unwavering as he pointed the barrel squarely at the man's chest. "Right now." The men hesitated, exchanging a quick, uncertain glance before retreating slowly. "We'll be back," one of them muttered under his breath as they melted into the darkness, their footsteps fading into the night. James stood rooted to the spot for a long moment, his hands trembling as adrenaline surged through his veins, leaving him both exhilarated and shaken. When he finally returned to the house, Talon was waiting by the door, its sharp eyes filled with an uncanny understanding that sent a shiver down James's spine. "They're not giving up," James said softly, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "But neither am I. We're in this together." Despite the ever-present danger, the bond between James and Talon deepened with an almost palpable intensity. The creature seemed attuned to James's emotions, offering comfort in its own unique way, nuzzling against him when stress tightened his features, following him loyally around the farm with a devotion that never wavered. One afternoon, as James repaired a sagging fence on the far side of the property under the warm sun, Talon suddenly darted ahead, its keen senses honed on something unseen. James watched as it stopped abruptly near a patch of disturbed dirt, scratching at the ground with its powerful claws. "What have you found now, boy?" James muttered, ambling over with a mix of curiosity and concern. To his astonishment, Talon unearthed a strange metallic device, a small camouflaged camera cleverly concealed beneath the soil. "They're spying on us," James realized, his anger boiling over like a storm-swollen river. He crushed the device beneath his boot with a satisfying crunch, a defiant message to whoever was watching. As the days stretched on, the tension grew thicker, a palpable weight hanging over the farm. James and Daniel knew the intruders would return, likely with greater force and determination, and they worked tirelessly to strengthen their defenses while gathering evidence against Jora Labs to build their case. Meanwhile, Talon continued to evolve, its once clumsy movements now replaced with the fluid grace and quiet power of a predator, a testament to its extraordinary origins. But even amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there were fleeting moments of peace that James clung to desperately. He would sit on the porch with Talon by his side, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of crimson and gold, wondering what the future held for them both. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he was resolute in his determination to protect the creature that had become his family, his anchor in a world tilting toward the unknown. The discovery of the hidden camera only deepened James's resolve, though it also complicated their already precarious situation. Whoever was watching them wasn't merely trespassing, they were collecting intelligence, likely preparing for a more coordinated assault. Daniel suggested taking the camera to a trusted contact in town, someone with the expertise to trace its origins and uncover who was behind the surveillance. But James hesitated, his protective instincts flaring. The fewer people who knew about Talon's existence, the safer they'd all be. But Daniel was insistent, his voice firm with conviction. "We need allies, James. If this goes public, Jora Labs, or whoever they are, will be forced to back off under the weight of scrutiny." Reluctantly, James acquiesced to the plan. The next morning, Daniel drove into town with the device, leaving James alone on the farm, with Talon under a sky streaked with soft pastels. It was a quiet day, the kind that almost lulled him into believing the looming threat was nothing more than a bad dream, fading with the dawn. James spent the morning tending to his crops, coaxing life from the stubborn soil, with Talon ever close at hand, a steadfast shadow whose presence brought a strange comfort. That evening, as James prepared a simple dinner in the kitchen, a sharp knock at the door jolted him from his reverie. He froze, his mind flashing back to the menacing trespassers, and grabbed his shotgun with practiced ease, approaching the door with cautious steps. Peering through the window, he was surprised to see not one of the suited men, but a young woman in her mid-20s, dressed in casual yet professional attire that spoke of purpose rather than threat. James opened the door a crack, keeping the shotgun visible as a silent warning. "Who are you, and what do you want?" The woman raised her hands in a gesture of peace, her expression calm but earnest. "My name is Dr. Amelia. I work with a conservation group. Please, I'm not here to harm you. I've come to warn you of danger." James studied her for a long moment, weighing her words against his instincts, then reluctantly stepped aside to let her enter. Once inside, Amelia glanced around nervously, as though expecting an ambush at any moment, her posture tense. "You're in grave danger," she began, her voice low and urgent. "The people after that creature, they won't stop. They don't care about laws or ethics. They only care about reclaiming their experiments." "How do you know about Talon?" James demanded, his grip tightening on the shotgun as suspicion flared anew. Amelia hesitated, then let out a heavy sigh, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Because I used to work for them, Jora Labs. I left when I saw the horrors they were perpetrating. Talon, he's not like anything else they've made. He's part of a project they've been developing for years, and they'll do anything to get him back." Amelia went on to explain that Jora Labs had been experimenting with advanced genetic engineering, blending DNA from disparate species to create hybrid animals endowed with enhanced traits. Talon, she revealed, was one of their most ambitious creations, a hybrid born from the fusion of a bird of prey and a prehistoric reptile, designed to be both exceptionally resilient and startlingly intelligent. They were supposed to destroy the eggs, Amelia said, her voice thick with guilt that seemed to weigh her down. But someone smuggled them out. I believe one of the scientists couldn't bear to see them eradicated, and that's probably how Talon ended up here on your farm. James's mind raced, piecing together the implications. The creature he'd come to love wasn't just rare, it was utterly unique, a singular marvel crafted by human hands. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, his tone sharp with lingering distrust. "Because what they're doing is fundamentally wrong," Amelia replied, her voice rising with conviction. "Talon deserves to live free, not be locked away in a sterile lab. And because—" She faltered, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Because I owe it to him. I played a part in creating him, and I can't undo that, but I can try to make it right." Amelia's arrival brought both a clarifying light and a tangle of new complications to their plight. She offered her expertise and assistance in protecting Talon, but the odds remained daunting. Jora Labs wielded resources far beyond their own, and their inevitable return hung over them like a storm cloud ready to burst. "We need evidence," Amelia insisted, her eyes alight with determination. "If we can expose what they're doing to the world, they won't be able to come after you without risking massive public backlash." Daniel returned later that evening, his face drawn and grim from his trip to town. The camera, he confirmed, had been traced back to a distributor commonly used by corporate security firms. "It's definitely connected to Jora," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of their findings. The three of them gathered around the kitchen table, forming a makeshift war council as they devised a plan to fight back. Amelia suggested reaching out to a journalist she trusted, someone who had a proven track record of exposing corporate malfeasance in the past. Daniel would continue his research into Jora's operations, digging deeper into their shadowy practices, while James focused on keeping Talon hidden and secure from prying eyes. As the days unfolded, Talon continued to grow, not just in size but in intelligence, displaying behaviors that left them all in awe. He began mimicking some of James's actions, such as opening doors with a nudge of his beak or fetching tools from the barn with startling precision. His keen senses also made him an exceptional watchdog, often alerting James to unusual activity on the property with a sharp chirp or a bristling of feathers. One serene evening, James took Talon for a walk along the edge of the field, hoping the fresh air might clear the fog of worry clouding his mind. The creature stayed close, its sharp eyes scanning the horizon with a vigilance that mirrored James's own. As they walked, James couldn't help but marvel at how far Talon had come. From a fragile, unhatched egg to a magnificent, almost mythical being that defied explanation. "You're not just a pet," James said softly, his hand resting on Talon's iridescent feathers as they shimmered in the fading light. "You're family, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away." Their newfound sense of purpose was abruptly shattered one fateful night when the farm came under siege. James was jolted awake by Talon's piercing screech, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade, followed immediately by the unmistakable crash of breaking glass echoing from downstairs. Grabbing his shotgun, he raced down the stairs, his heart hammering against his ribcage, to find two masked intruders standing in the wreckage of his living room. "Stay back!" James shouted, leveling the weapon at them with a steady hand. Despite the adrenaline surging through him, one of the men lunged forward, a glint of steel flashing in his hand. But before James could react, Talon swooped down from the staircase, his talons outstretched like deadly hooks. The creature unleashed a deafening cry as it tackled the intruder, knocking him to the floor, with a force that belied its size, pinning him beneath its weight. The second man hesitated, visibly unnerved by the sight of the fierce hybrid defending its territory. James seized the moment, firing a warning shot into the ceiling, the blast reverberating through the house like thunder. "Get out!" he roared, his voice raw with fury and fear. The intruders scrambled to their feet and fled, leaving behind a trail of shattered glass and overturned furniture in their wake. James stood amidst the chaos, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath, the shotgun still clenched. In his hands, Talon landed beside him, its feathers ruffled but otherwise unscathed, its presence a solid anchor in the storm. "You saved me, boy," James said, his voice trembling with a mixture of terror and gratitude as he reached out to touch the creature's head. "We're in this together, you and me." The attack left James shaken to his core, but it also solidified his resolve with an unshakable clarity. Talon wasn't merely a creature to protect, he had become a vital part of James's life. A partner, a guardian, and a beacon of hope illuminating the darkness that threatened to engulf them. However, the incident raised new and troubling questions about the lengths to which Jora Labs would go to recapture their creation. Amelia, Daniel, and James regrouped the following morning, their nerves frayed, but their determination burning. Brighter than ever, a fire stoked by the night's ordeal. James began to notice that Talon's presence was transforming the farm in ways he hadn't anticipated. Beyond his fierce protectiveness, the hybrid creature displayed a startling intuition that seemed almost supernatural. Talon started assisting with chores in his own remarkable way, dragging tools across the field with his powerful claws as though they weighed nothing, chasing off pests that dared threaten the crops with a swift flap of his wings, and even guiding stray livestock back into their pens with a gentle nudge of his beak. His intelligence was undeniable, and James marveled at how seamlessly Talon had woven himself into the fabric of farm life, becoming as much a part of it as the soil beneath his feet. Daniel watched in sheer amazement one afternoon as Talon herded a group of wayward sheep that had wandered too far from the flock, guiding them back with an ease that defied explanation. "I've never seen anything like it," he remarked, shaking his head in wonder. "It's as if he understands every word you say." "He does," James replied with a proud, affectionate smile, his chest swelling with admiration. "He's not just any animal. He's something different, something extraordinary." Amelia nodded solemnly, her expression shadowed with a quiet gravity. "That's precisely why they'll stop at nothing to reclaim him. Talon embodies everything Jora desires: control, power, and profit wrapped into one. But here, with us, he's free. We have to ensure it stays that way." Later that evening, as Amelia helped James board up the broken windows left from the attack, she opened up about her past with a vulnerability that caught him off guard. "I didn't always agree with Jora's methods," she admitted, her hammer pausing mid-swing as she spoke. "I stayed because I thought I could make a difference from within, temper their excesses. But when I saw what they were doing to creatures like Talon, treating them as disposable tools, I couldn't stomach it any longer." James leaned on his own hammer, his gaze steady as he regarded her. "You're risking a hell of a lot by helping us. Why put yourself through this?" Amelia hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of resolve and regret before she answered. "Because I believe Talon is more than just an experiment gone rogue. He's proof that humanity can create something extraordinary without destroying its essence. If we can protect him, maybe we can show the world there's a better way forward." James's stern expression softened, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "He's family now. My family. I don't care what they want or what they think they're entitled to. Talon's not going anywhere." Despite their united front, the weight of their predicament bore down on James like a millstone. The farm was his livelihood, his heritage, but it was fast becoming a battlefield, where every shadow held a threat. He feared for Talon's safety above all else, but even more, he dreaded losing the creature who had reignited a sense of purpose in his life, a spark he'd thought long extinguished. The next morning, driven by a need to understand the depth Of Talon's capabilities, James decided to test just how much the creature truly comprehended. He led Talon out to the farthest field, where the wheat stood tall and golden under the rising sun, swaying gently in the breeze. Holding up a stick, he tossed it into the distance with a casual flick of his wrist. "Go on, boy, fetch it," he called, his voice carrying a playful lilt. Talon tilted his head, his bright, inquisitive eyes flicking between James and the stick as though weighing the command. After a brief moment, he bounded forward, his powerful legs propelling him across the field with astonishing speed. He returned mere seconds later, the stick clenched carefully in his beak, and dropped it at James's feet with a triumphant chirp. James burst into laughter, clapping his hands with unrestrained delight. "Good boy, you're full of surprises, aren't you?" Talon responded by leaning his head against James's shoulder in a gesture of pure affection, his warmth a balm against the fears that gnawed at James's heart. For a fleeting moment, all his worries melted away. This wasn't just a creation born in a lab. It was a living, breathing being with emotions, instincts, and a capacity for connection that rivaled any human bond he'd ever known. Yet, as much as James cherished the growing bond with Talon, the necessity of secrecy began to exact a heavy toll. He couldn't risk letting anyone else onto the farm. Not even his closest neighbors, whose curiosity was beginning to stir. Whispers about his sudden reclusiveness started to ripple through the community, and James found himself dodging phone calls and avoiding trips into town altogether, isolating himself further with each passing day. One afternoon, Daniel confronted him directly, his tone laced with concern. "You can't keep hiding like this forever, James. People are going to start asking questions, and the longer you shut them out, the more suspicious it'll look." "I'm doing what I have to do to keep him safe," James shot back, his voice sharp with frustration. "If they find out about Talon, it's over. Everything we're fighting for ends." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I understand that, I do, but isolating yourself isn't the answer. You need allies, people you can trust to stand with you," Amelia chimed in, her voice steady and supportive. "He's right, James. If we're going to stand a chance against Jorah, we need more than just the three of us holding the line. We need to show the world what Talon represents before they can twist the narrative to suit their ends." James considered their words carefully, his mind a battlefield of conflicting impulses. Trusting others meant exposing Talon to risk, potentially unraveling everything he'd fought to protect. Could he afford to take that chance? That night, as the trio gathered around the kitchen table to strategize their next move, Talon let out a low, rumbling growl from his spot near the back door, his feathers ruffled and his piercing eyes fixed intently on the darkness beyond the glass. "What is it, boy?" James asked, rising cautiously to his feet, a familiar dread creeping into his bones. Amelia grabbed a flashlight from the counter, and the three of them stepped out onto the porch, their breaths visible in the cool night air. The beam of light sliced through the blackness, revealing fresh tire tracks etched into the dirt leading up to the barn. Someone had been there, watching, waiting. "They're still out there," Daniel muttered, his jaw tightening with resolve. James clenched his fists, the anger simmering within him boiling over. "Let them come. If they want a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." Amelia placed a calming hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "We need to be smart about this, James, not just brave. Talon's survival depends on us staying one step ahead." The intrusion marked a turning point for James, a stark realization that crystallized in his mind. Keeping Talon a secret wasn't merely about protection, it was about standing up against a system that sought to exploit and destroy for profit, a system that saw life as a commodity rather than a gift. Talon's existence was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of freedom, and James knew he had to fight for it with everything he had. As the night stretched on into the early hours, James, Amelia, and Daniel solidified their plan with a renewed sense of purpose. They would gather irrefutable evidence of Jorah's illegal activities and reach out to trusted allies who could help amplify the truth to the world. It was a risky gambit, a roll of the dice with stakes higher than they'd ever faced, but it was the only path forward to ensure Talon's future. In the shadows, Talon watched them with his bright, knowing eyes, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a united front, an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of adversity. The morning after discovering the tire tracks dawned with a gnawing sense of unease that settled deep in James's bones. Talon's instincts had proven prescient before, and now the tangible evidence of surveillance confirmed that Jorah Labs was closing in, their presence an ever-tightening noose. Amelia and Daniel joined him at the breakfast table, their expressions mirroring his own quiet alarm as they sipped their coffee in tense silence. Amelia broke the stillness first, her voice resolute despite the tremor beneath it. "I've been thinking, if they've already pinpointed the farm, it's only a matter of time before they make their move, and we won't be able to hold them off alone." James nodded grimly, his jaw set with determination. "We can't just sit here waiting for them to strike. We need to take the initiative, turn the tables somehow." But before they could hammer out the details of their next step, the low rumble of an approaching vehicle interrupted their discussion, sending a jolt of adrenaline through the room. James exchanged a quick, steely glance with Amelia and Daniel, his face hardening into a mask of resolve. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice low and firm. "I'll handle this." Stepping out onto the porch, he watched as a sleek black SUV rolled into view, kicking up clouds of dust as it came to a stop just beyond the fence line. The driver's door swung open, and a man emerged, clad in a sharp suit, his demeanor polished yet chillingly cold, his eyes scanning the property with a calculating precision that set James's nerves on edge. "Mr. Turner, I presume?" The man called out, his voice carrying a hint of menace that belied his composed exterior. "I am Mr. Kane, representing Jorah Labs. I believe you're in possession of something that rightfully belongs to us." James's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure, standing tall against the unspoken threat. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied evenly, his tone laced with defiance. Kane's lips curled into a faint, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not play games, Mr. Turner. We know about the egg, and we know what's hatched from it. Hand it over willingly, and we can avoid any unpleasantness." James took a deliberate step forward, his stance unyielding as he met Kane's. "Gaze head on. You're trespassing on my land. Get out now." Kane's smile vanished, replaced by a steely glare that radiated quiet fury. "Have it your way, but know this. You can't protect it forever. Jorah always gets what it wants, one way or another." With that, he returned to the SUV and drove off, leaving behind a swirling cloud of dust and a chilling promise that hung in the air like a storm on the horizon. Shaken but resolute, James returned to the house and relayed the encounter to Amelia and Daniel, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "They're not going to stop," he said, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "We need help, more than we've got now." Amelia nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "It's time to involve the community. If we can show them what's really happening here, we might stand a fighting chance against Jorah's resources." Reluctantly, James agreed, recognizing the wisdom in her words despite his lingering fears. That evening, he and Daniel ventured out to visit a handful of trusted neighbors, carefully explaining the situation without revealing too much about Talon's true nature. They spoke of Jorah's unethical practices and their attempts to exploit rural communities for profit, framing it as a shared struggle. To James's surprise, the neighbors were more supportive than he dared hope, Many harbored their own grievances against large corporations encroaching on their way of life. "If you need us, we'll stand with you," one of them said. Firmly, his weathered face set with determination. "No company has the right to take what's yours by force." Back at the farm, Amelia noticed Talon acting strangely, his behavior tinged with an unusual restlessness. He paced near the barn, his sharp eyes fixed intently on the horizon, as though sensing something unseen. Curious, she followed him outside, where he stopped abruptly and stared at a patch of ground with unwavering focus. "What is it, boy?" Amelia asked, crouching beside him as he began to dig, his powerful claws tearing into the dirt with surgical precision. Within minutes, he unearthed a small metallic device, an electronic tracker, its sleek design betraying its purpose. Amelia's heart sank as the realization hit her. Jorah had planted it during one of their earlier incursions. She rushed back to the house, holding the device aloft like a grim trophy. "They've been tracking him," she exclaimed, her voice tight with urgency. James snatched the tracker from her hand and smashed it beneath his boot with a force born of rage and desperation. "We have to act fast," he said, his mind racing. "If they know exactly where he is, they'll be back sooner than we think." Amelia's eyes lit up with a sudden idea, a spark of ingenuity cutting through the panic. "We can use this against them. Let's move Talon to a safe location and leave the tracker in a decoy spot. It'll buy us some precious time." That night, under the cover of darkness, the trio executed their plan with meticulous care. Daniel drove out to a remote area, planting the shattered tracker in an abandoned barn to throw Jorah off their trail. Meanwhile, James and Amelia led Talon to a heavily wooded section of the property, far from the house, where they constructed a makeshift shelter to conceal him from prying eyes. As they worked, Talon seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, staying close to James with an alertness that spoke volumes. James knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his feathers, their iridescence catching the moonlight. "We'll get through this, boy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you that." The decoy worked, at least temporarily. The following morning, drones buzzed over the abandoned barn like a swarm of angry hornets, and black SUVs swarmed the area, their engines roaring with purpose. From a safe vantage point hidden in the trees, Daniel and Amelia watched the scene unfold through binoculars, their breaths held in tense anticipation. "They took the bait," Daniel said, a note of relief softening his voice, "but it won't take them long to realize he's not there." Amelia frowned, her mind already leaping ahead. "We need to use this window of opportunity to gather more evidence. If we can expose their operations fully, they won't be able to touch Talon without facing a firestorm of public backlash." James nodded, his resolve hardening like tempered steel. "Then let's get to work. Every second counts." As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, James took a quiet moment to reflect on his bond with Talon, the creature who had become so much more than a responsibility. Talon was a symbol of resilience and hope, a living testament to the strength found in the unexpected. Watching him playfully chase after a butterfly in the clearing, his movements a blend of grace and power, James felt a surge of determination rise within him like a tide. "We're not just fighting for him," he said aloud, his voice steady, with conviction. "We're fighting for everything he represents: freedom, life, the right to exist." Amelia, standing nearby, offered a small, supportive smile, her eyes reflecting the same fire. "Then let's make sure the world sees that truth clear as day." The days following the decoy operation were a tense but productive blur of activity. James, Amelia, and Daniel worked tirelessly to build an airtight case against Jorah Labs, bolstered by the unexpected strength of the community's growing support. They needed proof. Irrefutable, concrete evidence of Jorah's unethical practices. and their relentless pursuit of Talon. While Amelia was sorting through a pile of old documents in the farmhouse attic, her hands dusty from years of neglect, she stumbled upon something extraordinary, a leather-bound journal bearing the faded handwriting of James's grandfather. Inside were meticulous notes and detailed sketches of a similar egg discovered decades earlier on the very same farm. Its description eerily reminiscent of Talon's own origins. A creature of striking resemblance, fierce yet tender. "James!" Amelia called out, her voice echoing through the house as she raced downstairs with the journal clutched tightly in her hands. "You need to see this right now." James took the worn book from her, his eyes scanning the faded script with a mix of disbelief and awe. He knew about this, but why didn't he ever tell anyone? Amelia pointed to a specific passage, her finger trembling slightly as she read aloud. The creature was hidden to protect it from those who sought to exploit its rarity. Its abilities are a gift to this world, but they must never fall into the wrong hands. The discovery added a profound layer of mystery to their fight, a revelation that shook James to his core. Talon wasn't just an anomaly dropped into their lives by chance. He was part of a legacy, a secret his family had safeguarded across generations, a mantle now passed to him. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to rally support from the community, his efforts bearing fruit beyond their wildest hopes. He organized a meeting at the local town hall, a modest building buzzing with the murmur of concerned voices, where James and Amelia shared their story with careful omission of Talon's most sensitive details. They spoke passionately of Jorah's actions, how they threatened not just the farm, but the broader ecosystem, a danger that could ripple outward to affect them all. "What they're doing isn't just wrong, it's reckless," James said, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of righteous anger that resonated through the room. "They're tampering with forces they don't fully understand, and the consequences could touch every one of us here." The room hummed with murmurs of agreement, a collective resolve taking root. One older farmer, his face carved with lines of hard-earned wisdom, stood up, his voice gravelly but firm. "We've seen enough of these big companies trying to take what isn't theirs, stomping over folks like us. If you need us, James, we're here. Count on it." Their words bolstered James's spirit, transforming his quiet determination into a roaring fire. The community wasn't just sympathetic, they were ready to stand and fight alongside him. Back at the farm, Talon's behavior grew increasingly fascinating, a blend of the familiar and the inexplicable that left them all in quiet awe. His intelligence and intuition were undeniable. He seemed to sense their emotions with an almost empathic precision, offering comfort with a gentle nudge of his beak or a melodic trill that soothed their frayed nerves. More remarkably, he began displaying abilities that defied all rational explanation, pushing the boundaries of what they believed possible. One stormy evening, as thunder rolled ominously overhead, Talon darted into the fields with a purpose James couldn't discern. Calling out his name, James followed, his boots splashing through puddles as he chased after him, only to witness something utterly astonishing. Talon stood resolute in the center of the field, his wings outstretched as lightning crackled in, the turbulent sky above. The air around him seemed to hum with an electric energy, a palpable force that vibrated through the ground. When the storm finally subsided, the crops nearby appeared healthier, almost revitalized, their leaves greener, their stalks standing taller than before. Amelia, who had joined James in the downpour, watched in speechless wonder, rain dripping from her hair. "He's not just rare, James. He's extraordinary beyond anything we imagined." James nodded, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "We have to protect him, no matter what it takes." Determined to seize the initiative, Daniel and Amelia devised a bold plan to gather hard evidence against Jorah Labs, a strike at the heart of their operation. Using the dismantled tracker as a starting point, Daniel reverse-engineered its signal with painstaking care, tracing its origin back to a sprawling facility concealed deep within the woods, a fortress of secrets hidden from the world. "Looks like this is where the magic happens, or the mayhem," Daniel said with a wry grin, showing Amelia the map he'd pieced together from the data. The two decided to stake out the facility, armed with cameras and recording equipment, their resolve steeled by the stakes at hand. They spent sleepless nights observing the lab's activities from a safe distance, their lenses capturing chilling scenes, cages filled with animals, some mutated beyond recognition, grotesque parodies of nature, and trucks loaded with unmarked containers slipping away under the cover of darkness. Their contents a mystery that fueled their determination. While the team labored to expose Jorah's dark underbelly, the corporation was ramping up its own efforts with relentless precision. Kane, the cold and calculating agent James had faced on the porch, now spearheaded a full-scale operation to retrieve Talon, his patience wearing thin. Drones began flying over the farm with increasing frequency, their mechanical hum a constant reminder of the enemy's reach, while unmarked vehicles were spotted circling the property like vultures awaiting their prey. The tension became a living thing, thick and oppressive, wrapping around them all. Amelia installed motion-activated cameras around the farm's perimeter, their lenses glinting like watchful eyes, while Daniel rigged a rudimentary alarm system from spare parts, a last line of defense against intrusion. Talon, sensing the mounting unease, grew increasingly vigilant, often positioning himself near the farmhouse's front porch at night, his silhouette a sentinel against the encroaching darkness. The constant pressure began to wear on the group, fraying their nerves and testing their endurance. James, usually a pillar of calm resolve, found himself snapping at minor inconveniences, a spilled cup, a creaking floorboard, his patience stretched to its breaking point. Amelia, ever the voice of reason, tried to soothe him, her tone gentle but firm as she placed a hand on his arm one evening. "We can't let them win, James," she said, her eyes locking with his. "Talon needs us to stay strong, to keep fighting." James let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his disheveled hair as he fought to rein in his frustration. "I just don't know how much longer we can hold them off like this. It's like trying to stop a flood with a handful of sand." Amelia's gaze softened, a flicker of empathy shining through. "We're not alone in this anymore. The community believes in us, and Talon, he believes in us too. That's worth holding on to." Amidst their mounting challenges, Talon provided moments of pure, unadulterated joy that served as a lifeline to their battered spirits. One golden afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, James watched as Talon played with a group of children from the community who had come to visit under the guise of a casual gathering. The children laughed with unrestrained delight as Talon flapped his wings, creating a gentle breeze that sent leaves swirling around them in a playful dance. The sight filled James with a renewed sense of purpose, a warmth that spread through his chest like wildfire. This wasn't just about protecting a creature. It was about preserving hope, wonder, and the sacred bond between humans and the natural world. A bond Jorah sought to sever for profit. "We're going to fight," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else, his voice steady with conviction. "And we're going to win, no matter what it takes." The simmering tension between James, his allies, and Jorah Labs finally erupted one moonlit night, a confrontation that would test everything they'd built. Despite their meticulous preparations, they couldn't anticipate the sheer ruthlessness Jorah would unleash to seize Talon. As the farm lay cloaked in the quiet stillness of the stars, the low hum of engines shattered the peace, a menacing growl that set their nerves ablaze. A convoy of unmarked trucks rolled toward the property, their headlights slicing through the darkness like blades, casting stark shadows across the fields. James and Amelia were jolted awake by the shrill blare of the motion detectors, their hearts leaping into their throats as they scrambled out of bed. Daniel burst into the living room, his face pale but resolute, a flashlight in one hand and a radio in the other. "They're here," he hissed, his voice tight with urgency as he grabbed additional gear. Amelia's heart pounded like a drum against her ribs, her hands trembling slightly. "We need to keep Talon safe, James, no matter what." James nodded, his jaw set with grim determination as he formulated a plan on the fly. "I'll distract them out front. Daniel, get Talon to the barn and keep him out of sight. Amelia, stay with him and make sure he's secure." The three split up with a sense of urgency born of desperation, each moving with a purpose honed by weeks of mounting pressure. Talon, sensing the danger with an almost preternatural awareness, followed Daniel into the shadows of the barn, his feathers shimmering faintly under the moonlight, a beacon that made him a target even in the dark. James positioned himself on the porch, shotgun in hand, his stance unwavering. He didn't intend to use it unless absolutely necessary. His goal was to buy time, to hold the line for as long as he could. The convoy screeched to a halt just beyond the yard, and Kane emerged. From the lead vehicle, flanked by a cadre of agents clad in black tactical gear, their movements precise and menacing. "Mr. Turner," Kane called out, his voice calm yet dripping with menace, a predator sizing up its prey. "Let's not make this difficult. Hand over the creature, and no one gets hurt tonight." James clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the shotgun as he stared Kane down. "You have no right to be here. This is my land, my home." Kane smirked, a cold, calculating twist of his lips. "We're protecting humanity, Mr. Turner. You're harboring a biological anomaly, something that doesn't belong in this world. It's not safe for you or anyone else." "That's not your call to make," James retorted, his voice cutting through the night with unyielding resolve as he stood his ground. Kane motioned for his agents to advance, their boots crunching against the gravel. "Your stubbornness is admirable, Turner, but ultimately futile." In the barn, Amelia and Daniel worked frantically to conceal Talon, their movements swift and silent. The creature stood motionless, his piercing eyes tracking their every action with a quiet trust that tugged at Amelia's heart. She whispered, soothing words, her hand resting gently on his beak to steady him. "It's okay, Talon. We'll protect you, I swear it." Daniel, crouching near a hidden trapdoor in the barn floor, motioned for Amelia to assist him, his voice a hushed whisper. "We can hide him down here. It's not much, but it'll keep him out of sight for now." Together, they maneuvered Talon into the small, cramped space, his feathers brushing against the rough wood as they lowered the door. Just as they finished, the barn door creaked open, a sliver of light spilling across the hay-strewn floor. "Search everywhere," a gruff voice barked, and flashlights danced across the shadows, probing for their quarry. Amelia's breath caught. In her throat, her body pressed low as she exchanged a tense glance with Daniel, who held a finger to his lips in a silent plea for stillness. The two crouched in the darkness, their hearts racing as the sound of footsteps drew closer, each one a hammer blow against their fragile calm. As one of the agents neared the trapdoor, Talon let out a low, guttural trill, a sound that froze. The intruder in his tracks, a primal warning reverberating through the barn. Before anyone could react, Talon erupted from the shadows, his wings spreading wide in a breathtaking display of power that filled the space with his presence. The agent stumbled backward, tripping over a hay bale in his haste to retreat, his flashlight clattering to the ground. The commotion drew more agents into the barn, their shouts overlapping in a chaotic symphony. But Talon was ready. With a powerful flap of his wings, he kicked up a whirlwind of dust and straw, disorienting his pursuers in a cloud of debris. Amelia seized the opportunity, grabbing Daniel's arm with a fierce grip. "We need to move him, now, while they're off balance." The two guided Talon through a hidden side entrance, slipping out into the night and leading him toward the dense woods behind the farm, their breaths ragged as they ran. Back at the house, James was running out of options, his stand on the porch growing increasingly desperate. The agents were closing in, their numbers overwhelming, and Kane watched the scene unfold with an infuriating calm that grated against James's fraying nerves. "You can't protect it forever," Kane said, stepping closer with a predator's confidence, his voice smooth as silk. "This isn't just about you, Turner. It's about the greater good. Our good." James glared at him, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You don't give a damn about the greater good. All you care about is control, and I'll die before I let you have it." As Kane raised a hand to signal his men to advance further, a sudden gust of wind swept through the yard, fierce and unexpected, stirring leaves into a swirling vortex. An eerie silence followed, broken only by the sound of James's heartbeat thundering in his ears. He turned to see Talon emerging from the shadows of the woods, his wings glowing faintly in the moonlight, a vision of raw power and grace. Talon let out a piercing cry that split the night, his presence commanding the attention of everyone on the property with an authority that transcended words. The agents hesitated, their movements faltering, as the creature stood tall, an imposing figure against the starlit sky, his eyes locked on Kane, with an intensity that unnerved even the hardened operative. Kane's confident demeanor cracked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "What in the hell is this?" Talon took a deliberate step forward, his gaze never wavering from Kane, a silent challenge etched into his stance. The agents raised their weapons, their hands trembling slightly, but Talon didn't flinch. Instead, he flapped his wings with a force that sent a gust tearing through the yard, knocking several of them off their feet and scattering their formation. James seized the moment, his voice ringing out with authority. "You see that? He's not a threat unless you make him one, so back off." Kane's face twisted with frustration, his composure unraveling as the situation slipped from his grasp. "This isn't over, Turner," he spat, his voice laced with venom. With a reluctant wave of his hand, he signaled his men to retreat, their boots pounding the earth as they fell back to the convoy. The trucks roared to life, their engines fading into the distance as Talon stood his ground, unwavering until the last vehicle vanished from sight. As the dust settled, Amelia and Daniel emerged from the woods, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief as they rejoined James on the porch. James ran to them, pulling Amelia into a tight, desperate hug, the tension draining from his body in waves. "They're gone, for now," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and gratitude. Daniel nodded, his expression still grim despite the reprieve. "But they'll be back, and next time they'll come harder. We need a plan that'll hold." James looked at Talon, who stood proud and unflinching beside him, a pillar of strength in the chaos. "We'll protect him," he said firmly, his resolve unshaken. "No matter what it takes, we're not done fighting yet." The night after the raid felt heavier than any they'd endured, a suffocating weight pressing down on the farmhouse as James, Amelia and Daniel gathered in the living room, their faces illuminated by the dim, flickering glow of a single lamp. Talon rested just outside, his enormous frame blending seamlessly with the shadows of the barn, a silent guardian watching over them. Despite their temporary victory, they knew with bone-deep certainty that Jora Labs wouldn't relinquish their claim so easily. The battle was far from won. "We can't keep waiting for them to attack again," Amelia said, her voice resolute despite the weariness etching lines into her face. "We need to go on the offensive, take the fight to them before they regroup." James nodded, his mind aligning with hers, despite the exhaustion tugging at his limbs. "You're right, but how? They've got resources, connections, everything we don't. We're just a family, trying to protect a bird." Daniel leaned forward, placing a laptop On the coffee table with a decisive thud, his eyes alight with a spark of defiance. "Not just any bird," he countered, pulling up a series of satellite images of the surrounding area with a few deft clicks. "If Talon's abilities are as unique as we've witnessed, we need to use them to our advantage. He's not just a creature. He's a symbol of resilience, a living testament to what we're fighting for." Amelia's eyes narrowed, her curiosity piqued despite her fatigue. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Daniel opened another file, revealing a detailed map of Jora Labs' headquarters, its sprawling layout marked with precise annotations. "We expose them, completely and irrevocably. If the public knows what they're doing, experimenting on animals, violating every ethical boundary imaginable, they'll lose their power, their legitimacy. The world will turn against them." "But how do we pull that off?" James asked, his voice thick with skepticism. "They've covered their tracks so well. Every move they make is shrouded." Daniel smirked, a glint of mischief in his tired eyes. "That's where Talon comes in. He's our ace in the hole." Daniel outlined his daring plan with a fervor that belied the late hour. They would capture footage of Talon displaying his extraordinary abilities, his strength, his intelligence, his raw power, and pair it with the incriminating documents Daniel had painstakingly unearthed about Jora Labs' illegal activities. The combined evidence would be enough to spark a firestorm of public outrage, forcing authorities to launch investigations that Jora couldn't bury. Amelia hesitated, her brow furrowing with concern. Putting Talon in the spotlight like that could make him an even bigger target, more valuable to them than ever. "It's a risk, no doubt," Daniel admitted, his tone sober. "But it's the only way to ensure his safety in the long run. If we keep him hidden, they'll hunt him forever. If we expose them, they'll have bigger problems than one escaped hybrid." James took Amelia's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We've come this far together. If this is our best shot at stopping them for good, we have to try. I trust you both." Amelia looked out the window at Talon, his majestic form standing tall against the moonlight, as though he understood their conversation, a silent partner in their struggle. Finally, she nodded, her resolve hardening. "Let's do it. Let's end this." The next morning, the team set up an array of cameras in the field behind the farmhouse, the air buzzing with a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. James worked closely with Talon, coaxing him to perform some of the remarkable feats they'd witnessed over the weeks, his voice gentle yet encouraging. Talon, as if sensing the weight of the moment, spread his wings wide, creating gusts of wind that rustled the nearby trees with a force that spoke of his untamed power. Amelia recorded every second, her hands steady as she captured Talon's agility, his uncanny intelligence, and the sheer, breathtaking strength that set him apart. At one point, he seized a boulder with his talons, lifting it effortlessly into the air before setting it down with pinpoint precision, the act a marvel of control and might. As the session progressed, Talon performed a display that left them all breathless with awe. His feathers, catching the sunlight at just the right angle, shimmered in iridescent hues of deep green and burnished gold, creating a dazzling spectacle that seemed to paint the air itself with color. The footage was more than enough to prove his uniqueness. It was a testament to his otherworldly nature, a living argument against Jora's claims. With the recording secured, Daniel worked late into the night, his eyes bloodshot as he edited the footage with meticulous care, pairing it seamlessly with the damning evidence against Jora Labs, documents detailing their experiments, their abandonments, their ruthless pursuit of profit over life. Meanwhile, Amelia and James took turns keeping watch, their senses heightened, knowing that Jora's agents could return at any moment to reclaim what they'd lost. Daniel finally uploaded the finished product to a secure server, his fingers hovering over the keys as he prepared it for release. "Once this goes live, there's no turning back," he warned, his voice a mix of exhaustion and resolve. James placed a steady hand on Daniel's shoulder, his eyes fierce with determination. "Do it. Let the world see." Daniel hit the button, and the video was dispatched to news outlets, social media platforms, and animal rights organizations across the globe, a digital arrow aimed straight at Jorah's heart. Within hours, the video began to gain traction, its reach exploding as hashtags like #SaveTalon and #ExposeJorah trended online, a wildfire of awareness spreading unchecked. The public's reaction was swift and overwhelming. News stations picked up the story, airing clips of Talon's breathtaking abilities alongside the damning evidence of Jorah's misdeeds. Protests erupted outside the lab's headquarters, angry voices demanding justice, while calls for official investigations flooded government offices, a chorus of outrage that Jorah couldn't silence. However, the trio's relief was short-lived. A fragile reprieve shattered by the reality closing in. That evening, as they watched the news coverage unfold on a flickering television screen, the unmistakable roar of helicopters filled the air, a menacing sound that set their pulses racing. Lights from drones swept across the fields around the farmhouse, their beams probing the darkness like hunters stalking prey. "They're here," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance as she gripped the edge of the table. James grabbed his shotgun, though he knew deep down it would be little match against the force descending upon them. "Get Talon out of here now," he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Daniel pointed toward the woods with a steady hand. "There's a cave system nearby. It's not perfect, but it'll be safer for him there than here." Amelia and Daniel hurried to Talon, who seemed restless but compliant, his instincts attuned to the danger as they led him toward the shelter of the trees. James stayed behind, planting himself firmly on the porch to confront the approaching agents, his heart a war drum in his chest. Kane emerged from one of the helicopters, his silhouette stark against the whirling blades, flanked by heavily armed agents whose movements were methodical and relentless. "Did you really think you could outsmart us, Turner?" Kane called out, his voice dripping with mockery as he strode forward. James stood his ground, the shotgun leveled before him, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "The world knows what you've done. Your secrets are out. It's over for you." Kane smirked, his confidence unshaken. "The world might. No, but you've made a fatal mistake. You've turned Talon into something too valuable to ignore. We'll find him, no matter where you try to hide him." James aimed the barrel at the ground, a warning shot loaded in his stance. "Not if I stop you first. You'll have to go through me." Before Kane could respond, a deafening cry rent the air, a sound that shook the earth beneath their feet. Talon had returned, his massive wings cutting through the night sky like a storm made flesh, his presence a force of nature unleashed. He swooped low, scattering the agents with a gust of wind from his powerful wings, forcing Kane to retreat hastily to the safety of his helicopter as chaos erupted around him. Talon landed beside James with a grace that belied his size, his eyes blazing with a fierce loyalty that took James's breath away. For a moment, man and creature stood side by side, an unbreakable team forged in the fire of adversity, their bond a shield against the odds. The agents, outmatched and thrown into disarray, began to fall back, their retreat a scramble of shouted orders and panicked movements. Kane's voice crackled over the helicopter's loudspeaker, sharp with fury. "This isn't over, Turner. You'll regret this defiance." As the helicopters lifted off, their lights fading into the night sky, James turned to Talon, placing a trembling hand on his beak, the warmth of the creature grounding him. "You saved us again, buddy," he said, his voice thick with emotion, gratitude washing over him in waves. Amelia and Daniel emerged from the woods, their expressions a blend of relief and disbelief as they took in the scene. "What now?" Amelia asked, her voice soft but steady, a lifeline in the aftermath. James looked at Talon, who stood proud and unwavering beside him, a pillar of strength in the fading chaos. "We keep fighting, together always," he replied, his resolve a rock against the storm. The air around the farm remained charged with a lingering tension, even as the last of Jora Labs' helicopters vanished beyond the horizon, their retreat a temporary reprieve rather than a victory. Talon stood tall beside James, his massive wings slightly spread as though ready to take flight at a moment's notice, a living testament to their defiance. James, Amelia and Daniel gathered in the barn, the dim light casting long, flickering shadows across the wooden walls, their faces etched with exhaustion but alight with determination. They knew Kane's threat was no idle boast. The war was far from over. "We can't stay here anymore," Amelia said, her voice firm but tinged, with a sadness that mirrored the ache in James's chest. "They'll come back, and next time they won't hesitate to tear this place apart to get him." James nodded, the reality settling over him like a shroud. "You're right, but where can we go? Talon isn't exactly easy to hide. He's too big, too unique." Daniel leaned against the barn door, his mind racing as he considered their dwindling options. "We need a place where they can't reach us, somewhere remote, protected from their grasp. There's a wildlife reserve upstate that might be perfect. It's owned by an old colleague of mine, a conservationist who'd understand Talon's importance and keep him safe." Amelia glanced at Talon, her heart heavy with the weight of leaving behind the farm that had become their battleground. "It's his best chance at survival, but how do we get him there without drawing every eye along the way?" Daniel managed, a faint, weary smile, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. "Leave that to me. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve yet." Over the next few days, Daniel worked with a relentless focus to arrange their escape. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. If you like the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.